For any team in the NBA, there is always this desire and hope of adding a superstar talent to your roster, whether that be through free agency or via a trade, or of course, through the draft and selecting a player that you hope becomes a superstar in the future. And for the Chicago Bulls, one of the biggest market teams in basketball, has always struggled to actually acquire superstars in the NBA despite being in a big market. Obviously, they had the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan, and of course, more recently, in Derrick Rose before he got injured. Those are really the only two superstars the Bulls have ever had in franchise history. I know some won't agree with that. They'll say that Jimmy Butler was a superstar, even currently Zach Lavine or DeMar DeRozan, even Scottie Pippen, but I'm talking about superstars in the league. Guys who were top 10 players in the NBA, and even though some might consider Jimmy a superstar now, he wasn't there yet when he was on the Bulls. But all of this to say is that for the first time in a long time, the culture and perception of the Chicago Bulls as a franchise is changing, and it started by bringing in a new front office. And that's that players are now seeing the Bulls as being a team that is actually looking to be aggressive and compete, which will hopefully one day bring a superstar back to the city of Chicago. Now, why am I saying all this? Well, as I'm sure most of you saw, especially if you're at all active on NBA Twitter, that the Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving are at an impasse on reaching a contract extension, and by all indicators, Kyrie Irving is going to be on his way out of Brooklyn, which really shouldn't be a surprise. I'm sure the Nets are over his shenanigans, but that's not the superstar player, if you still want to call Kyrie a superstar player, that had Bulls Twitter going crazy when we first learned of Kyrie wanting out of Brooklyn. No, it was that Kevin Durant, in the event Kyrie is traded, could be looking to request a trade himself out of Brooklyn. Now, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, KD is monitoring the situation and assessing his future with the Brooklyn Nets should Kyrie Irving be on the move. There have been some reports that Kevin Durant has requested a trade from the Nets, but most of those sources aren't the most credible, so take that with a grain of salt. But either way, in today's video, we're going to be discussing if, in fact, KD asks out of Brooklyn, should the Bulls do everything in their power to go after him? How realistic would it be even to go after someone like Kevin Durant? And would it make sense for the Bulls based on what they would have to give up for him in return? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I want to be clear that at the time of this recording, there has been nothing confirmed that Kevin Durant has indeed requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. And it is possible that if the Nets get a sizable return in a trade for Kyrie Irving, that perhaps he stays. But honestly, when you factor in where KD is and his career, he's going to be 34 by the time next season starts. He's going to want to play for a team where he feels he can win a championship. And unless the Nets somehow pull off a trade by sending, say, Kyrie to the Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis, since it's been rumored that Kyrie wants to go to the Lakers, I really can't see outside of that Kevin Durant thinking he's playing on a title team with Ben Simmons and a bunch of role players. So as such, let's play the game. Let's say for a moment that Kyrie Irving does indeed leave Brooklyn, which I actually think is most likely to happen, but Kyrie leaves and Kevin Durant asks out as well. Again, has to be done via a trade because Kevin Durant is under contract, and because KD is still a superstar level player, arguably a top 5 player in the NBA, you're going to have to give up a lot for him, because not only do you have to match his $44 million salary, but the asking price is going to be high, even if the Nets don't necessarily have a ton of leverage in a situation where they're being forced to trade him. But because teams would know Kevin Durant is available and there would be interest in acquiring him throughout the league, the Nets are essentially going to take the highest bidder for Kevin Durant. So you can't expect to be getting pennies on the dollar just because he's demanding a trade. Like, the Nets don't have to trade him until they feel they're getting a good deal for him in return. But aside from what you would have to give up for Kevin Durant, let's start with whether Kevin Durant would even want to come to Chicago. Like, would the Bulls even be on his list of teams he would want to be traded to? Now, obviously, there are going to be contending teams that are going to pique his interest. A team like the Miami Heat would certainly be a title team if they added Kevin Durant. Obviously, the Celtics would as well, but I can't really see KD fitting with their lineup centered around Jason Tatum. The Warriors, he wouldn't go back. He has too much pride for that, I would think anyway. The Sixers, the Clippers, even the Suns. I mean, there are a lot of teams I could see being on KD's wish list. But as far as the Bulls, I honestly wouldn't say that it's out of the question that he would want to come play in Chicago. If you had asked me this a couple years ago, I would have said you were crazy. But with the way the Bulls have positioned themselves to at least be a playoff team, the fact that they were one of the top teams in the league when healthy, that's a place that he can go to for a chance at a championship. He's also given very high praise to Zach Lavine on multiple occasions. He played with Zach on the U.S. Olympic team this past summer. They won the gold medal together. And look, Chicago is a big market. a lot of national and international exposure, and this would be an opportunity for Kevin Durant to be a hero in the city of Chicago by bringing back the Bulls their first title since Michael Jordan. The man would be a god among Bulls fans. And if there is anything we know about Kevin Durant, is that he really internalizes what people think about him ever since leaving the Thunder to join the 73-9 Warriors. He's still looking to validate himself that he can win a title as that lead guy who wasn't already going to a championship-made team. It's a big stage. It's a chance to follow Michael Jordan's footsteps in winning a title in Chicago. So yes, I do think Chicago could be a plausible destination that Kevin Durant would be interested in if he's looking to get out of Brooklyn. Now, the real question is, and I know some people are going to think I'm insane for even asking this, but it's a valid question in my view, and I'll explain why. But that's whether Kevin Durant actually makes sense for the Bulls, even if Chicago was a team he wanted to join. And despite the fact that the majority of people, Bulls fans or not, would say that's a stupid question, if you have a chance at adding Kevin Durant to your lineup, you do everything in your power to make it happen. Well, the reason I even start off in asking that question is because there are a lot of things to consider here. Now, it is no question that Kevin Durant is without a doubt one of the best players in basketball when healthy, which I'll get into in a little bit. I personally think he's a top 15 player of all time when you look at his accolades and achievements, and of course his career is still ongoing. He's one of the greatest scorers the game of basketball has ever seen, a four-time scoring champ who's averaged 27.7 points per game over the course of his career and on ridiculous efficiency at near 50%. Only one other player has been able to average more points per game over the course of their career on that kind of efficiency, and that was Michael Jordan. He's top 10 in player efficiency rating in NBA history. He shoots from deep at a high clip, a strong rebounder, good passer. Although his defense has dropped in recent years, he's still a pretty solid defender. Multiple first-team All-NBA selections, All-Star selections, an MVP, Finals MVP, NBA champion. I mean, you get the point. He's a generational type of talent that only comes around every so often. There is no denying his talent and what he would be able to bring to the Chicago Bulls. But the question is, at what cost? Some things to consider. Kevin Durant is turning 34 in a couple months. Not saying that that's old by life standards, of course, but by basketball standards, even for a superstar, it's getting up there. You also have to factor in that Kevin Durant just recently signed a contract extension with the Nets, a max contract extension that will pay him through 2025-26 season, at which he'll be making $53.2 million when he's 37 years old. Now, of course, guys can still play at a high level by the time they're 37. Take a look at LeBron James as an example, or even Chris Paul, but it's pretty rare for a player to be playing at a star level by the time they're 37. The other thing to consider, Kevin Durant's injury history. KD has been a little more injury prone in recent years. He had his first bigger injury back in 2015 when he was still with the Thunder, when he only played 27 games that season. Then, of course, he tore his Achilles in the NBA Finals against the Raptors, which then sidelined him for the entirety of the 2019-2020 season. Then he only played 35 games in the 2020-21 season with the Nets due to various injuries. And then last season, of course, despite looking like a surefire MVP candidate, the way he started off the year, got derailed by injuries that sidelined him for a number of weeks, and the Nets fell in the standings as a result. So despite still playing at a high level when he's healthy, it's more important to note that since tearing his Achilles in the 2019 season, Kevin Durant has played in 90 NBA games since the 2018-19 season. You can't tell me that his health going forward as he hits his mid-30s, making over $40 million a year, isn't a concern to you by taking on that type of contract. The other thing is, it's not even the contract you're taking on. It's not even the injury risk that you're taking on when bringing in an older veteran player. It's also, and I really think this is the most important piece, what you are also going to have to give up for him in return. At least one of the Bulls' core four of Lavine, DeMar, Vucevic, and Lonzo would have to be included. And I say at least one because it's probably going to have to be two. Like, depending on the direction the Nets were to take in the event they lose both Kyrie and KD in a single offseason would dictate what type of trade would be made. If they're going to be looking to bring in star talent in return to try and still be competitive to build around Ben Simmons, then the Bulls are likely going to have to give up DeMar DeRozan, because DeMar's trade value is at an all-time high, and since he's an older player and not part of the Bulls' distant future plans anyway, it would make more sense to include him than someone like Zach LaVine, especially since Kevin Durant has spoken very highly of Zach in the past. And it wouldn't just be able to be DeRozan because salaries alone wouldn't work. You would probably have to include Patrick Williams and Kobe White, and the Nets are going to want some younger pieces they can build with for the future, or they may even try to make a push for DeMar and Lonzo Ball together in a package, which would make the salaries work, or DeMar and Vucevic. Again, it all depends on the direction of the Nets. Are they still looking to compete or just blow it up? If they're looking to blow it up and rebuild after losing Kyrie and Kevin Durant, to be honest, the Bulls don't really have a ton of assets to entice a rebuilding team. The Bulls don't have a lot of draft capital. They have younger players, but unproven younger players. And again, you're going to have a lot of teams competing to outbid one another for Kevin Durant. If the Nets do look to blow it up, a trade would probably look something like Vucevic, really because you need his salary, and a rebuilding team would be okay taking on Vucevic because it's an expiring contract that frees up their books going forward. Patrick Williams would have to be included because, again, you have to include your most valuable younger trade assets. You'd likely have to include Kobe White because you also need his salary, and then you're probably going to have to throw in some picks. The first-round pick from Portland, and you may even have to look to trade another first-round pick, which the next available pick for the Bulls that they can make anyway is in 2027. Hopefully they would be able to keep some sort of protection on that, whether lottery protected or top 5 protected. The point is, though, it's going to be a lot either way. Either you mortgage your future on an aging Kevin Durant. Yes, it's still Kevin freaking Durant, and the Bulls would certainly be a title contending team with him, but it's an aging Kevin Durant that's going to be taking up most of your salary cap space all the way into his late 30s. Or you have to give up some of your best players, which, as much as I love DeMar DeRozan, I would have no problem trading him for Kevin Durant. The problem is it wouldn't just be for DeRozan. You're going to have to include other assets like Lonzo Ball or Patrick Williams to make the salaries work and to make the package attractive enough to the Nets to where they don't just say, thanks, but no thanks, we have better offers from other teams. The one last piece I will add, because I know this is getting long, Kevin Durant isn't exactly a locker room leader. I'm not saying he's a toxic locker room presence like maybe Kyrie Irving is, but Kevin Durant has been known to have issues butting heads with teammates in the past. He's been known to kind of be weird on social media, engaging with random internet trolls, clapping back at media personalities, which that I'm actually fine with. And Kevin Durant really seems to be one of these guys where he really cares about what people think of him, even though he tries really hard to act like he doesn't. Ever since leaving to go to the Warriors and everyone calling him a cupcake, he's always been on this mission to prove to everyone he's the man, and that it wasn't a bitch move that he went to the Warriors after blowing a 3-1 lead to them in the conference finals. And because of this, when Kevin Durant doesn't do well, especially in a playoff type setting where he tries to do too much, he crumbles. It doesn't happen often, but we most certainly saw that in the 2016 Eastern Conference Finals against the Warriors, and of course, this recent postseason where they got swept by the Celtics and Kevin Durant had his worst playoff series performance ever. So look, I know that was a lot, maybe a bit of a ramble, but in short, as much as I like the idea of trading for Kevin Durant, as much as I recognize it would give the Bulls that much more national recognition and exposure, more respect around the league, they would be a title contender, and yes, they would be better in the short term. I'm just not sure if it's worth the risk based on all the factors I just laid out between how much you would have to trade to get him, as well as paying a guy over $50 million by the time he's 37. And maybe that's a championship or bust mentality, which I hate that mentality, by the way. Like, there is something to be said about just having a consistently good basketball team, even if it means not winning a championship. But a move like this really could set you back for years if it doesn't work out, by mortgaging your future to get an aging superstar. Obviously, I see the other side of the token, who is to say, that Kevin Durant can't still play at a high level even for the next 2 to 3 years, win a couple titles with the Bulls become a free agency destination that adds more talent over time, and the rest is history. So I get it. There is still that possibility, but I have a hard time seeing it based on KD's recent injury history. And again, this could be all moot because maybe Kevin Durant doesn't even leave Brooklyn or doesn't want to come to Chicago. But I would love to hear what you guys think. How would you guys feel about trading for Kevin Durant? Let me know in the comments. And guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.